Okay. Today's topic is denatured alcohol, and denatured alcohol is the following: the American government needs to collect taxes from all over the place. So one of the ways to collect a large amount of tax is what they call a sin tax. Okay, and that means if they think you're doing something that's sinful or extravagant, then they feel they have a right to charge you extra tax on it. Okay, so one of the things that they like to charge extra tax on is alcohol that people drink, or whiskey and things like that people are drinking. So they charge approximately 100% tax on that alcohol. Okay, so it costs the company $1 to make it, then they charge them $1 worth of tax on that also. So you, the consumer, pay $2 to buy that because they charge 100% tax to drink it. Okay, and before we go on, when I say the word from now and on, the rest of today, when I say the word alcohol, I mean ethyl alcohol. Okay, there are other types of alcohol. Alcohol is really a chemical term. It can mean butyl alcohol or propyl alcohol. We mean, in this case, today and on, we mean ethyl alcohol or ethanol, which is the generic. When you say alcohol generically, that means that's what you're referring to. That's what we're concerned. At the beginning, when they first started this idea of making higher taxes, I don't know if the taxes were so high. Everybody had to pay that tax. There was no way to get out of it. The tax was on alcohol, ethyl alcohol. Of course, whatever the tax was, it was a very high tax. Then, about 100 years ago, in 1907, the Americans came up with this idea. The Europeans had already been doing it. They came up with this idea of something called denaturing. And that is, they said, if you're going to be using your alcohol for non-food use, for non-beverage use, then we can do things we don't have to charge you the tax. You're not being as sinful as this person is. We don't have to charge you the tax. And what we can do is we'll put something into it, a denaturant, something that makes it taste awful or that makes it poisonous, so that we'll be sure you won't sneak it out and go drink it or sell it for drinking. We're going to give something to you to make it that you won't use it for those uses. Then we don't have to charge you the tax, and we can have this two system. The same alcohol costs $1 for you and it costs $2 for him, because for you we made sure you won't drink it, and he might stop drinking.
Is that concurrent with I forgot what it's called.
We'll come to that in a second. Okay. Now so they created this thing it was like an industrial grade alcohol, which couldn't be used for drinking. Okay. And this idea of denaturing played a role in Prohibition. That's what you're talking about, which came shortly afterwards. Okay, it played a role in Prohibition in that, first of all, the idea that you could denature alcohol gave even the hechtilza to make Prohibition. You couldn't make alcohol illegal. That's what Prohibition was. They made it illegal to have alcohol. You couldn't make alcohol illegal if you would cut it out from industry also. How would you stop industry from using it? Too many people needed it and all kinds of things. So the ability to have Prohibition, to say you can't drink alcohol, worked because there was already a structure for you could use alcohol that wasn't fit for drinking. Okay? And the second part is that during Prohibition, where people were desperate to get their alcohol, one of the things that people did, we'll talk more about this later, people began drinking this industrial alcohol that you weren't supposed to drink. It was meant to be not drinkable. Okay? And the government had to then make their rules stricter and stricter. They had to toughen up the rules about denaturing in order to stop people from drinking it, because now people were more desperate. We'll talk more about that later. And people were using that industrial alcohol, so they had to make the rules of denaturing even stricter in order to make them work. Okay. So, thank you. So this has been going on for, I told you, better 100 years. Here in the United States, better 100 years. At this point, when I looked last, about a year ago, when I counted it up, there were 54 different ways that the government has for denaturing alcohol, using 105 denaturants to make 123 different things. That is to say, if you want to make shampoo, there's a specific formula for how you denature the alcohol to make shampoo. And if you want to use, the truth is there's more than one. There's many ways to make shampoo out of it. And if you want to use this denaturant, this chemical, it could then be used for the following bunch of uses. Okay, so there's pages and pages, as you could guess, of government formulations of how you should do that, with a very exact recipe for each one of them. Okay,
so why did they still denature not just legal?
What'd you say?
Why did they still denature?
That's what we said at the beginning, that the denaturing is really to those people who don't have to pay taxes. It's so that the industrial people don't pay the beverage tax that the alcohol, the whiskey produces. That was the original kavanah. That was why they did it. Okay. So the denaturing formulas have numbers assigned to them. Okay. So there's a denaturing formula that's formula 33. Okay. And then this one with letters and numbers, 40C is a denaturing formula. Okay? And you would see that on the side of it, sometimes you'll see in an ingredient panel, they refer to it by that number. They'll call SD alcohol 26. Okay, or they'll say SD alcohol 6B. Okay? And that means it's especially denatured alcohol with the formula 6B. I mean, that's the formula that they use. Okay, so some of them, many of them use, when they refer to the item, they give you the number. They'll say what it is. Here's an example of it. Okay, this is Axe deodorant. Okay, the first ingredient is SD alcohol 40B. That's the first ingredient listed in this thing. Okay, and if we want to know what that is, what is SD alcohol 40B? It has in it that you have to add in for every 100 gallons of alcohol, you have to add in a 1/16th of an ounce of Denaturant benzoate, and an eighth of a gallon of butyl alcohol. Okay, so that works out. It works out that you're putting in about 5 parts per million of Bitrix into the alcohol. Okay, and we know that 5 parts per million is horribly inedible. Okay, you couldn't eat that stuff. Okay, it's not possible to get that stuff down with 5 parts per million. So the alcohol that's being used for this
Is edible?
it's inedible.
Just 5 parts.
5 parts per million is
That's
enough.
great.
Enough, yes. Even already at 2-3 parts, you'd already notice it. At 5 parts, it's inedible. So we know that the stuff is not edible, which is just perfect because it obviously doesn't affect the person using it as a deodorant. Obviously, that doesn't make a difference to them. And that's why it's a formula good for deodorants. Okay, it might not be for something else, but for deodorants, that's fine.
And that's going in your body.
It's on your body, and obviously they've determined that there's nothing wrong with Bitrix. A little bit of Bitrix
into your body.
onto your body, correct? But we also know that it's completely inedible. Okay,
The ingredients it says Bitrix?
yeah, the 1/16th of an ounce of Denaturant benzoate. That's Bitrix. That's what Bitrix is. So it's getting to this. It's got in the alcohol. This has got 5 parts better, just under 5 parts per million. And so that's the government's formula for this one. Okay, and other ones, now some of them just say the word alcohol, denate, like D-E-N-A-T, I've seen on some things, and some of them just use the word alcohol. Because if you pick up scope, we're going to get to the mouthwashes later, but if you get to, some of them just say the word alcohol. But if it's not being used in a whiskey, in something that you're meant to drink, it is denatured alcohol. Okay? I mean, nobody would be so foolish as to pay the taxes. They're not paying the taxes, they're using denatured alcohol, and everyone's got their own formula. Okay. So, knowing that, it's interesting when something new comes up, so that you could see when a new thing comes up by when tshuva start being written about something. Okay, you could see that's how you could see. But when shilohs start coming up, you want to know when did they discover the art of distillation to make whiskey, and you see there's tshuvas in the Rivash at right that time about whether that thing should carry this or other things like that. Anyhow, so shilohs came up about whether alcohol, which is denatured, becomes mutter. Okay? Do we say, if you would say to me that I put 5 parts per million of Bitrix into alcohol, if you would have said it, don't call it denatured. You say I put in 5 parts per million of Bitrix, I would say it's not royal achila. You would think on the surface, you'd say it's not royal achila, and it became mutter. When things are not edible, they lose their issue to them. So we would think that would to us, we would have looked at that and said, yes, it's not edible. Okay, so there's quite a number of places we spoke about. The one who brings many of the shittas of it, the Shefer Shor Mitzyonim Ba'alacha, written by a place maybe 40-50 years ago. It's written as a beer on the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It has many things to say, but there are others. We'll pass by others also. We'll talk about it. Now, I'm gonna say very quickly 3 reasons that are not accepted. Okay, we're gonna talk in a minute about 2 reasons that are more acceptable as to why denatured alcohol should possibly be usher. Okay, we're going to pass quickly by 3 reasons. Again, at the surface, we would all say that it's not for Pesach. Well, it would be for Isser also, for that matter. But we're going to say 3. On the surface, we would all guess that it's mutter. Okay, that would be our initial reaction. Okay, so there are 3 No, it's not Ashrei. Ashrei is not one of the reasons. Ashrei is only when you actually drink it. Okay, Ashrei is when you eat something, you're showing you consider it edible. If I spray it on myself, I'm not showing that I consider it edible. What? No. Sicha kishtia is if you take an isser, you're not there under the right circumstances. You're not allowed to rub it into your body. But that doesn't show Ashrei. Ashrei says you only say Ashrei when I'm showing something that's when I eat it, I'm showing that it's edible. If I take something inedible and I put it on myself,
that doesn't apply to Sicha kishtia.
Of course not. No, of course not. Okay. So So now, what maybe what you mean is, this is the first of our things that we're going to say is that Pike can say is not true, is that maybe something being not royal achila only counts if the person's going to eat it. But if the person's going to not eat it, they're going to spray it on themselves. What's the difference that it's not royal achila? Maybe the Torah only allows things that are inedible when you're eating it. But if you're doing other hano with it, then it doesn't make a difference if it's not edible. Okay, even if it's not edible, what?
The Torah answered the owning and the using, and not only just the eating. So
right.
What's the kavana of just focusing on eating?
Right. So the Torah said you can't eat it and own it and use it.
Right.
So now maybe you'll say when the Torah said but if it's not edible, then you can eat it. Well, maybe if it's not edible, you can eat it. There's sort of like a logic to that. But if it's not edible, maybe you still can't rub it on your body. Or maybe you still can't own it for other people.
Because of the other reasons, or because of itself, the one reason?
It's not edible. Who cares if in other words, who cares if it's not edible? The fact
No. I don't understand what the focus is on the edible when the issue is not...
I got it. You're saying why would the Torah tell us, why should it be mutter just because it's not edible, when there are other reasons that have nothing to do with eating it all? Okay. So the simple understanding is that when something becomes not edible, it's just not food anymore. It's not that original item.
But the Torah didn't ask you because it's food. It asked you because it's edible, because you own it, because it's in your possession.
So the answer to that is that really, that's not the way we look at it. We look at it and we say it's only usher as long as it's food. When it becomes not food, it's not chametz anymore. So if it's not chametz, there's nothing wrong with owning it and using it, etc. Those.
But what you're saying, chametz is by definition
is only when it's a food item. When it becomes not okay. So let's quickly go by the other ones. We're not going to have time for other things. Some people said that you can't decide whether alcohol is royal achilas kelev because dogs don't eat alcohol even when it does taste good. Okay, if you gave them some Johnny Walker, they wouldn't drink it either. So we can't judge whether something is royal achilas kelev.
Someone did an experiment.
I'm just telling you what people say. I didn't say.
Doesn't mean it's acceptable.
No, it's not the truth. These are shittas that people have said that for different reasons are not correct. We don't have time to go into it. Last is there are people who think that things are only considered not edible when they spoil or they rot or they turn inherently inedible. Whereas if you add something into it, then those kind of rules don't apply. So this was, the alcohol started as nice plain old alcohol. They threw in some bitters. Some people said that wouldn't be considered inedible. Just as a short way to tell you, one of the riots to answer all these points is, the din says in Shulchan Aruch that if a person has ink that has beer mixed into it, okay, you're allowed to use it on Pesach because it's not considered royal achila, even though all these things that we just said over here don't make any sense. Okay, if you had any of these reasons, they wouldn't have fit. The beer was fine until you mixed it into the ink. Okay, all these things wouldn't apply. Okay, we passed by these. Okay, I'm sorry, I went through it very quickly. Okay, so there are two main reasons why people say why they think that denatured alcohol should be considered also on Pesach, even though the denatured alcohol is not edible. Okay, one is, if you read the papers, okay, and you every once in a while you're going to see a story. Someone just told me one. So you'll read a story about drunks who were penniless, who ended up drinking all kinds of odd things that they weren't supposed to. Okay, who were drinking perfume. Okay, there are people, or you'll hear about teenagers who wanted to get high and they're not allowed to buy alcohol, so they drank Purell. Okay, or other kinds of, or someone was just telling me about people in nursing homes who they want to drink also, but they don't give them alcohol, so they drink other things that they can find. Okay, so you find all these kind of stories about people doing it, and therefore they say it must be royal achila. The stuff is royal achila because you see all these kind of people are drinking this stuff. Okay, but the reason to argue on that, of course, is we have a rule. We say butler daita etzakodim. We don't look at what unusual, strange people do. So as a rule, we take butler daita. Okay, so now. Just to understand what this shita is, why this shita should say to be machmer, if you look at things, at different times, you see that this was more or less common, these people doing these odd things. As an example, during Prohibition, this was much more common. Okay, the idea that people drank industrial alcohol was very common during Prohibition because people were more desperate. Okay, so that is to say is that you could possibly look at it and say, it's not that it's not royal achila. It's that it's only marginally royal achila. Okay, it's barely edible. So for regular people are not holding by eating things that are only marginally edible. So we eat other things. Okay, we don't stoop to that point that we eat those things. So Kenzan, we could judge it. If you judge it as being passably royal achila, it's reminiscent of what Rosh Hashanah says. Rosh Hashanah is a pretty well-known tshuva, where he says you should be very cautious in judging whether things are royal achila. He brings an example from the Gemara, of mei'achilas from different animals that are considered royal achila, of tzoya, all kinds of funny things that you would, in a million years, would have never thought of royal achila. So he doesn't say that they're not royal. He says you should just be cautious in deciding these things. And the reason why some people might be machmir on this thing is because the fact that these people are drinking it, not that they think that should prove that it's edible. Of course not, we don't go by the strange people doing things, but if you see that under desperate situations people will drink it, that might tell us that it's not completely inedible, maybe it's just passably inedible, and maybe that still qualifies as royal achila. Okay, now, there are those who say, there's two versions.
Well, just the stuff that they add to the alcohol, bitters, whatever. Is that supposed to be a poison or just to make it taste bad?
It depends. Some of the formulas poison it, and some of them just make it taste bad. They're different types. There was a big to-do during Prohibition because the government, people were just drinking this stuff anyhow. So the government came up with an idea that they would denature with something called methanol. Okay, methanol, which is poisonous. It tastes. We'll see in a second. We'll talk about it more. It tastes exactly very similar to alcohol, to ethyl alcohol. And people didn't know what they were getting, and people were dying right and left. Thousands of people were dying right and left. So it was a big to-do that the government, in trying to be strong and make sure people didn't drink this stuff, was basically killing people. Okay, they said, we'll kill you if you drink this stuff. That was to try to discourage them. So sometimes it's poison, but usually it just tastes bad. So one report of what Ramosha said, about Ramosha was machmir about this question. One report is that Ramosha was machmir for this reason. And he said that if you just... there are people who would drink this stuff. Okay, in his example was, for those of you from New York, he says, the bums on the Bowery will drink perfume. Okay, so the
His neighbors.
They were his neighbors, yes, that's correct. And so there are those in the family, there's one version of what Ramosha says that that's why he was machmir. When I asked Rabbi Kaplan's married to a great-granddaughter, okay, he says, the family says, Ramosha said that there is a tzad that you should be machmir because of this. There's a tzad. But you could sell your perfumes, even though Ramosha Be'etzim didn't sell things that were chametz. He would say it's okay, you could be selling a perfume. But the Yevet, he would be mitzarefet with other things. But that was such a possibility that because there are people who drink it, he would be machmir to say that it should be also. And again, the hezber is l'chayr. It's not that just because Amr Shugana drinks it that makes it something. But the hezber l'chayr is that if there are people like that who drink it, that tells us that we might be just being mufunak. We might be too sensitive, but it's really edible. That's one. Okay.
Isn't that if you that I can understand with scope, Listerine, where I could drink it. What am I going to do? Spritz it like Banaka Blast, the hex? Break it open and drink it?
No, wait. If you took chametz and you locked it in a safe, you're still not allowed to own it on Pesach. So the fact that it's hard to get at doesn't make it...
But not that drinking that X.
No. We have to talk is it edible? If it's edible and you locked it up in this container, that doesn't make it worth it to keep it. Just because of that, but is it available? If it is, it is. Is it edible? Then it is. The other possibility is that the reason why that the etzem, while the alcohol is mixed with this denaturant, it's considered not royal achila. It's not edible. But that's only a temporary state, because really, if you tried hard enough, you could get the denaturant out of the alcohol. If you made an effort at it, you could get the denaturant out of it. And therefore, they say that that's not considered not royal achila. It's only not royal achila if it's permanently stuck in that form. If you have a way to get it out, then that's okay. Of course, the argument against it is that when
Can you elaborate?
Sure. If let's say I took Isser, okay, and there was hector that was just floating around on the top of it, I wouldn't say that it's. I'm sorry. I took Isser and I had something bad tasting floating around in it. They could just scoop out of it. I wouldn't say it's not royal achila. It is royal achila. There's temporarily something in there, but I could easily remove it, so it stays also. So they'll say is you could remove the denaturant, you can get it out.
How do you get it out?
you can use different methods. Hold it. I'll talk about that in a second. You can use methods to get it out. Let's say you'll distill it and get it out, and therefore it really is royal achila. It temporarily has something in there, but there's a way to get. Since there's a way to get it out, it doesn't count. The only things that count is when it's hopelessly mixed together. And the other argument against it, is that in order to do that, in order to get these denaturants out, needs expertise and all kinds of fancy equipment. Let's say, Moshe mentioned, you could use distillation. Okay? Most people are set up to do distillation. When they distill it when they mix it in with methanol, one of the reasons why they used to like putting methanol is because its boiling point is so similar to ethanol that it's really hard to distill it. Okay, that means of course you could do it, but it's really difficult to do it. When I read parts of a book written by somebody, a scientist who was from the people encouraging the American government to create this status of denatured alcohol. So the book was printed in 1907. Okay? So he said it's true that we scientists can denature and remove the denaturant out. It's true we could do it. He says, but nobody would. Because if you had so much expertise, you just make your own moonshine. You make your own alcohol at home. What do you do passionate with this stuff? You make it yourself. So you see that it is possible. We say that it is possible, but not for average people. Okay, usually don't look at what just a very sophisticated person. We look at what an average person could do.
It's like bugs.
Okay, yes, I guess you could say that. Yes. Okay, so there's different ways to look at that thing, whether that is or is not. How easy, or is that easy enough that it qualifies it? Okay. Rabbi first says that Moshe held that this was the reason. Okay, not the first reason. The reason Moshe was machmir because of this reason, because Moshe said that in Europe the drunks would boil up the industrial alcohol to get out the denaturant out of it. That's how he understood it, and therefore it was considered it was possible to get it out. Or first says even Moshe only said that as a chumrah, just like the chumrah ba'alma. He didn't example that was a din. Again, it's not that what the average person could do. We wouldn't really count that as removable, but as a mikveh din.
How do you say denatured alcohol in Hebrew?
I have no idea. Sorry, it's a minor word. I don't.
No, I'm saying you look at
teva.
How do they refer to it?
Teva.
No, they said that they mix into it they mix into poison. I don't know if they use a word for denaturing, like in English. Okay.
Means not.
Okay, now, when I have to just tell you that in speaking to Rabbi Schwartz about it, we have a funny situation here, but when I spoke to Rabbi Schwartz about it, the first way of saying that because some people drink it, he completely couldn't understand. He says, Bachlal didn't get it. When I told him this hesber, which is that the hesber is because it's removable, and there are people who can go through the effort, he didn't agree with it, because again, he said that he doesn't agree with it because it's only removable through such sophisticated means that it's not for your average person. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't count just because you could remove the beer out of this ink also. But he didn't think of that. But at least it was understandable. That way he was more able to accept that someone could hold like that, even though he personally disagreed. He didn't think that was right. So now I said we have a funny situation because Rabbi Schwartz personally holds like that. That's what he personally holds, that the denatured alcohol is mutter. But the CRC, as a matter of policy, is machmir on it because, and Rabbi Schwartz will tell you that we should do that, because in order to get the medicine letter signed, some of the other people on the letter are machmir, and therefore to get the letter signed, Rabbi Schwartz has to sign that we're machmir, and then of course if it says on the letter, we have to follow what it says on the letter. So we have this funny situation that Rabbi Schwartz, Mrs. Schwartz, might use denatured alcohol at home, but the CRC official policy is to be machmir. Okay.
We asked too many people to sign the letter, that's what I think.
What did you say?
We asked too many people
No,
to
I
sign
think,
the letter.
no, Rabbi Schwartz, no, it's not what Rabbi Schwartz says. Rabbi Schwartz says, the letter is so important, it's so crucial that it be signed and it be out there and that it be, have all those people's names, and all those people's names on it, that he thinks it's worthwhile to be machmir on a number of things, more than one thing that he's machmir on that letter, that he doesn't want to be, in order to get the letter.
First, by the share on Sunday, someone asked about lipstick, whether anything is good. I said, but you sign otherwise. I stand by what I'm saying.
That's the thing, because
Vitamins, he said, but he holds that.
a few years ago, someone asked also.
Vitamins is what he will hold, yes.
He holds to that.
Yes. Now, all of this. So those are the two well-known reasons as to why people would disagree and think that's awesome. However, we now need to just pause for a second and think. All of that we've said, everything that I told you until now, came with an assumption that denatured alcohol is not edible. It's either tastes bad or it's poisonous. Okay, that's the assumption. That's the point of the law. Okay, but if I'm going to give you two examples that help us bring out that might not be such a right assumption, and that is as follows. Denaturing formula number 29. Okay, Formula number... We're doing it in a second. We're getting there in a second. Okay, that's next. Denaturing formula 29 is as follows. It says for every 100 gallons of alcohol, you have to add either a gallon of ethyl acetate or acetaldehyde. Okay, both of those are poisonous. Both of those are no good for you, and nobody would drink alcohol mixed with acetaldehyde or ethyl acetate. You don't have to worry about that. That's fine. That's why it works, and that's why they made that formula. What are you supposed to do with formula number 29? There's a whole bunch of things you could do with it. One of them is something that we use all the time. Okay, it's for making vinegar. You make vinegar out of alcohol and water. So denatured alcohol formula 29 is for making. One of the things you use it for is vinegar. Now tell me something. How could you put poison into your vinegar? How does it make sense that they would make a formula that you make vinegar out of poison?
You distill it probably for him.
No, you could. If they would be distilling it, then they'd be afraid you would run off with it and sell it to a vodka company. So how do they do it? The answer is that when you make vinegar, when it goes from alcohol to being vinegar is acetic acid, to being vinegar, one of the in-between stages are ethyl acetate and acetaldehyde. So if you throw in ethyl acetate or acetaldehyde into your vinegar tank, guess what's going to happen? It's going to turn into vinegar. Okay? So it's an amazing denaturant, because it means that when it's in the alcohol form, nobody would drink it. But when you put it into a vinegar tank, it's amazing. It turns into vinegar. It turns into a completely edible item. Okay? So you put in a denaturant, and it's a great denaturant for vinegar. It's not good for mouthwash, because you'd kill people if you did that. But if you put it into vinegar, it's a great denaturant, because when it goes in, it has no problem. It's poisonous. No one would drink it. When it comes out on the other end of the factory,
how does that work?
it turns...
The enzymes?
No. If you want to know the chemical forms, I'll read it.
You'll explain to email it to me.
It's a chemical reaction. Part of becoming vinegar is becomes acetaldehyde in between. Okay? There are actually laws about vapors that escape out of the plants, because those vapors are dangerous. Okay? These are things that are escaping into the air. So it's a great denaturant. Okay? And another example of that is our good old Listerine that's over here. Okay? Similar would be to other mouthwash, I suspect. But for sure for Listerine is a good example. You'll hear why. There are 5 formulas you could use to denature alcohol that are going to be used for making mouthwash. Okay? There are 5 of them. Okay? Formula number 37 is one of the ones that you're allowed to use for making... 37, you mean 38B. That's what we're doing in a second. Okay? 37 says, for every 100 gallons you have to add in 45 ounces of eucalyptus, 30 ounces of thymol, and 20 ounces of menthol. Okay, if you want to use it, that's what you have to do. And so I made a cheshbon of how much of those items are in Listerine, because Listerine gives you certain percentages about certain things. Okay, and guess what? It comes out that there are, for every 100 gallons of the alcohol that's in there would be 49 ounces of eucalyptus. You have to have 45. Okay, there's 34 ounces of thymol. There have to be 30, and there's 22 ounces of menthol. That has to be 20. Okay, so
is that the volume of it?
That's my volume. Then there's another formula, formula 38B, that says for every 100 gallons of alcohol, you have to add in 10 pounds of a combination of these bunch of things. Okay, there's a whole long list of maybe 40 things that you can add in. Any ones you want to, it has to be at least 10 pounds. And within that list of 40 things are eucalyptus, menthol, methyl salicylate, and thymol. Okay, those are the 4 active ingredients in Listerine. Okay, and according to the cheshbon that I made, how much of those are there in 100 gallons? 9.95 pounds. Okay? So, and the law is you have to obviously my calculation is not perfect. It's not a coincidence that the law says you have to have 10 pounds, and there's just exactly 10 pounds of those items in this thing. Okay? What does that mean? What does that say to you? That says to you is either they made up the formula because they like Listerine, okay, or the guys who made Listerine did an exact copy of what the government's formula. They're obviously in cahoots. I mean, obviously this is working together. It's not a coincidence that Listerine's got exactly what you're supposed to have to denature it. Okay. So now let's look at Listerine for a second. Okay, I don't know if anybody here uses Listerine. Okay, and the following doesn't work. What I'm about to tell you is only true for people who use Listerine. What it is as follows: when you use Listerine, the first 1 or 2 times that you use it, the taste is very strong, and people have a very strong reaction to taking it. Okay? When they put it to their mouth the first time, second, or even if they haven't used it in a long time, the reaction that people have is very strong. Okay? They find it very distasteful. After people are used to using it, they don't have that problem. Okay? People who use it regularly don't find that to be distasteful. After the first 1 or 2 times, for whatever reason, that's not a problem. So in order to judge whether the Listerine is royal achila or not, you're going to have to use somebody who's used to it. And the other people, when they put it to their mouth, if you've never had it before, you put it in your mouth, you spit it right out. It tastes awful. But after you're used to it, it's not a problem. So I know someone like that. Okay, does anybody here use Listerine?
Yes.
Okay, so
Don't they have an orange flavor in it?
the orange flavor has bugs in it. We don't use the orange flavor.
Really?
Yeah, it's the orange
Carmine?
flavor. Yeah, the orange flavor has bugs in it.
You know the orange flavor has carmine in it?
Serious? How do you know?
Says it on the
It says it on the
label.
package. Yeah, this is, you should just know this is OK certified.
It is?
Yeah, there's 3 flavors that are on our medicine list. 3 flavors that are OK certified.
No okay on the
No OK on
label.
it.
I know the medicine ones by heart.
There are 3.
No okay on it.
Are you giving out shots like a timer?
So, yeah, Mark told me to college. You know that.
Is there okay on it?
So, there's not. Because, I'm sorry, we're distracted, but it goes to Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, it needs to have hashgacha. So there are a few flavors that they make that are the exact same thing as here, and it's kosher. Anyhow,
What does the okay say for Pesach?
They don't count. So for people who are used to having that in their mouth, okay, it has a taste. They're used to the taste. That part of it doesn't bother them. And I found one of those people, okay, and they tasted it, and it tastes fine. Okay, I'm not saying this tastes like Pepsi. I'm not saying that you want to go home and drink this stuff and make little chaims on it. But they drank it, and it tastes fine. It doesn't have a taste that's not. That you for sure wouldn't call nifsal mei'achilas kelev. It probably isn't even nifsal mei'achilas something. So what happened over here? Anybody who wants to be a guinea pig?
I don't know.
Thank you. Do you ever use glycerin before? It doesn't have the same
when I grew up.
trying to prove here. If you drink it. Take it.
Swallow it?
You're not supposed to swallow. Try to drink if it's
I'm
edible.
going to swallow it.
So I'm saying to swallow it.
wants you to swallow it.
Because I can't drive afterwards.
Yeah, it's true. It's 20% alcohol. That's true. You're right. Okay.
What about listening to zeros?
So
I'm very mindful of that.
So what it is like this. Let's think for a second. What happened? The government has something like this that you're about to put into your mouth. Okay? They can't make it poisonous. That would be pretty scary to make poisonous stuff you're putting in your mouth. They can't make it very awful tasting because it's got to go into people's mouths also. So the government did, just like by vinegar, they came up with a formula that was good enough. And they did their trick to make it, people probably won't take this and go make beverages out of it. But it couldn't be too awful because this is not shampoo. This is stuff that are going in people's mouths. Okay, it's like vinegar. You can't make vinegar poisonous. It's ridiculous. You can't make that alcohol poisonous. So they had to come up with this formula that had this real chachma to it. It doesn't make it poisonous, but it's alcohol. But in vinegar, it's okay. It makes it poisonous when it's alcohol, but not when it's vinegar. So for this also, obviously there was a compromise that had to be reached over here. And say, what? They had to make a compromise. They had to make a compromise that would say, this thing is going to be bad enough. Somehow it's bad enough that people won't drink it as is, but it won't be so awful that people can't put it into their mouths. Okay, so what I'm saying is,
It's diluted.
it is a little bit, it should not diluted. That's true. So maybe they have kavanah, maybe their intention was, well, it's pretty bad pure, but in this case, it's only 20% of the formula over here. So they'll mix it on the chazaraya and they'll make it pass.
Doesn't that play a role also, how much it's diluted?
It plays a role in that.
In halacha?
Yes, we said beforehand that if it's easy to fix something up and make it edible again, that's considered royal achila. So you're trying to take axe and makes it royal achila. It's hopeless. I mean, it has bitrix in it. It's really hard to imagine you can make it royal achila. But here, obviously, they made the formula. They were, so to speak, more makel about the formula, so that when you dilute it with this amount of stuff, it would be edible. So my point is that
No, you don't make a bracha on it.
Would you make a bracha if I swallow it?
I guess you have to find out how much of a shik you are.
Oh my gosh.
No.
Okay, so the
Heinemann says you can't take the strips because you need a bracha because you swallow it.
really? Okay.
What?
So
Heinemann says you
Yeah,
can't
those are make me swallow. It's not make me swallow.
You make a bracha if I
It's
swallow
not make me swallow. Just
my point is like this.
it's not make me swallow.
The shaila in the poskim as to whether denatured the shaila in the poskim the shaila in the poskim as to whether denatured alcohol is mutter or usher. The shaila whether it's mutter or usher, that shaila is assuming that we're dealing with stuff that the whole assumption is that the stuff is not royal achila. But we're seeing that in certain denaturants, particularly the ones that are being used that you're going to put into your mouth, but it could be any of them, in certain ones of them, it's not necessarily that it's not royal achila. So, even if you want to choose to be makel and say that denatured alcohol is really mutter because it's not royal achila, that rule has to be taken. You have to put thought into that. It's not a rule, an overall rule. In Europe, the formulations are a little more straightforward, and the stuff is just awful. Okay, I don't know if in certain places, some of the formulas I looked at there are awful. In America, we have 54 formulas with all different colors. Each one is used for a different thing. Then you have to. It seems to me that even if you want to be makel about denatured alcohol, that has to be done with more thought. You have to think about it because some of these things are food items. The truth is, the people who want to be machmir also have to give it thought, because if they have bitrix in their acts, then they might say, forget it, I'll be makel on that. I'll for sure, no one would drink that stuff. But I'm saying, I'm talking about within the side of the mei'achilas have to keep in mind that just because you make about the theoretical shaila, about whether denatured alcohol should be mutter, doesn't mean that the formula you're holding in your hand is something that you want to be makel. Okay?
All deodorants have bistrix in it?
No. There are a number of different ways to denature alcohol that will be used for deodorant. It says in there, I use formula 40B. Well, formula
How am I supposed to know as a consumer, or even in the office, to say, 40B's got bistrix, because B stands for bistrix?
No. The answer is that you need someone who knows the answer. It's not that it's a secret.
110.
You could probably look it up online.
It's not a secret what the formula is. It's not a secret.
110.
Okay. 4 small little points before we finish. Okay. That was the main point. But the 4 small points is as follows. First is, even people who are machmir about denatured alcohol, who overall think that you should be machmir, they're only machmir when you're dealing with something that's basically pure denatured alcohol. Let's say you take a deodorant. Okay, deodorant, not necessarily, basically is alcohol or some kind of an alcohol with perfume. Or perfumers, that's what it is. It's just denatured alcohol with water, or maybe it doesn't have water, and it has a flavor, a fragrance to it. Okay, so things like that are just straightforward. When you get into more complicated things, let's say you take denatured alcohol and you put it into your shampoo, so you say, okay, the denatured alcohol I want to be machmir on. Okay, very nice, you want to be machmir on. That's fine. But think about all the other, that's the chazarai that's in the shampoo. Okay, the rest of the stuff is enough to make it not edible. So that's one point. Second is, the government has a special exception. I don't yet understand why, but they have a special exception. One industry is allowed to not use denatured alcohol. Okay, one industry, that is the perfume industry, is allowed to use beverage alcohol, pay the tax on it, and when they prove to the government that they've used their alcohol for perfume use, they can then get their money back. It's called the non-beverage drawback. They're allowed to get their money back, the tax that they paid. So that is to say that people in the perfume, cologne type of industry have the right, if you cannot use denatured alcohol, so if you want to say, I'm making because of denatured alcohol, lav dafka, that the perfume actually uses denatured alcohol. The perfume might actually use regular alcohol and use
money, doesn't it?
What it is that you have to lay out the money. You have to lay out the money and then prove to the government that you're entitled to a refund. So the truth is, most people don't do that. Most people find it as a hassle, and they find it as a lot of paperwork for chayina. But I'm just saying, there's such a possibility that a perfume cologne might not even have denatured alcohol, as opposed to a mouthwash would for sure have denatured alcohol. Okay.
Do
Third,
they have ingredients on the...
some do and some don't.
Yeah,
Some do and
very
don't.
hard to say one.
Some of them do and don't. Okay. Third is, our discussion is about alcohol. And we of course walked into the room thinking that alcohol is chametz, and very much it could be. Of course, alcohol can be made out of chametz. Okay? But the truth is that alcohol in the United States is almost always, maybe like more than 90% of it is not made out of chametz, it's made out of corn. Okay? It's made out of kidneys, which is not an issue. It's not a shiloh for these things if they're made out of kidneys, for a bunch of reasons. So they're made out of, it's usually not made out of chametz. So it's true that there are people who are machmir about denatured alcohol. That shita, in part, it's a subject to Raisa. In part, it's because there's a shiloh of the Raisa over here. Okay, when we're talking about a shiloh that's not a shiloh, it's really mutter because it's not chametz altogether. Then the whole shiloh is much more kal, much more easier to much more makel to deal with that shiloh. Okay, what I just said is for America. If you got something from Europe, of course, in Europe the alcohol is more likely to be chametz. And last is there's a shiloh. In chametz has a special chumrah that it may not become mutter till it's nifsal mei'achilas kelev. Okay, most isur when it becomes nifsal mei'achilas adam they become mutter. Chametz has a special chumrah it needs to be nifsal mei'achilas kelev. Why? The reason is because the reason is because chametz, even when it's not edible, is still royal chameh ba'isas acheres. It still has a food use that it could be used to begin the fermentation of another batch of food, even when it itself is not edible. So the Chazon Ish says, it's very straightforward, that if you have a form of chametz that's not edible, and it's also not royal chameh ba'isas acheres, it doesn't have that character trait about it, then it would be mutter even by nifsal mei'achilas adam. Doesn't have to be nifsal mei'achilas kelev. Okay, so there's good reason to think that the alcohol is not royal chameh isas acheres, and there's no yeast. There's nothing in there that could work to be chameh isas acheres. So there's good reason to think that it may not even need nifsal mei'achilas kelev, which might play a big role over here.
Right.
Okay? And within the shiloh of nifsal mei'achilas kelev, I'll just leave you with a shiloh, which is nifsal mei'achilas adam. It's easier for us to judge, so to speak, because we're humans. Okay, we know how to judge that. Nifsal mei'achilas kelev has the following shiloh to it. Let's say they had put methanol. They had denatured something with methanol. Methanol and ethanol taste very similar. Okay, they have very similar taste. Many people wouldn't know the difference if they drank something with methanol mixed in. Something with methanol mixed in is still not royal achilas adam, because people are intelligent. And if I told you that this thing has poison mixed into it, you won't eat it. Because your intelligence will tell you not to, not your tongue, your intelligence will tell you don't eat this thing because it's poisonous. Okay? What do you say when you get to something that's has to be nifsal mei'achilas kelev? The kelev doesn't have any challenges. When he sees it, he only goes by what it tastes like. If to him it tastes like edible, then he's going to eat it. So in judging something that's nifsal mei'achilas kelev, do we have to think about the fact that does that only work if it tastes bad? If it's just poisonous, maybe poisonous doesn't qualify for nifsal mei'achilas kelev, because the poison doesn't mean anything to him. He doesn't understand that the thing in front of him is poisonous. He only understands what the thing tastes like.
If they're taking a piece of meat and laying it with poison on it,
yes.
you'll eat it.
So anyway, that shiloh, for your curiosity, you can think about it over Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon disagreed about that, but you can think about that over Shabbos.